Hello and welcome to a new sketchbook tour. I thought I can make a collection or a preview of inspiration from fall art. So there will be a combination of older artworks and also newer artworks that I created this autumn and start of the winter. And as you can see, and if you have been around here for a while, this one is a little bit older artwork, but still one of my favorites because it feels quite cozy and I still like the color palette. And this one was inspired by Swiss mountains, and you can find inspiration for mountains and lakes like these also in Italy, like Italian Alps, German Alps, Austrian Alps, if you're thinking in terms of Europe. So if you are new around here, I'm Eva and I live in Europe. That's why I have a lot of artworks inspired by Europe. Alright, let's look at more art. Alright, here is another illustration or sketchbook page inspired by fall, as you can see here. And this was combination of different art prompts during October, where you can combine different prompt lists and follow different prompts to illustrate kind of new pages. And because many of you voted for fall and autumn inspired sketchbook spread, this illustration and the process of the illustration is part of one of the tutorials in my art club. So this one specifically is all about how you can balance the composition and fill the whole page while thinking about colors, shapes, and also textures. And also what I specifically like about these illustrations are some of the textures and colors that we managed to add to this illustration together during the tutorial. And I think the cats are quite cute. And also during the video I share with you guys how I tried different color palettes and how I balanced contrast, but it's always based on your preferences. So that's why I'm sharing the explorations during the classes and tutorials as well, so you can make the illustrations more your own based on your own likes and preferences. So I will add a link to this tutorial if you are interested in learning more and practicing composition. Right, here is another illustration which was done in October, as you can see, and this one was following more prompts as well. So for example, this one was from the bird list, so I chose the green pigeon because I thought it's a very interesting bird to illustrate because it had so many interesting colors. And here I played with some textures and some lines, and overall I tried to keep it still quite simple, so kind of simplified shapes and lines. And this one was again another prompt, and the prompt here was a tree trunk, I believe, or a bark. So you could interpret that prompt differently, like dog is barking, or bark on a tree trunk, and so on. So you can have a different kind of word play based on these prompts. And more of the prompts were acorns and autumn leaves, which are very kind of fitting and easy go-to theme when you want to illustrate fall and autumn themed art. Alright, this one is a little bit older, and here I explored a variety of shapes for mushrooms while keeping very similar color palette. So this is something you can explore when you have limited time and you just want to draw something simple or not too complicated. So you can take one object and try to adjust the shape in different ways. So here, as you can see, I tried rounded end of the mushroom. Here, this one is a little bit more flat. On this one, we can see the bottom of the mushroom from downward angle. So we are looking from bottom up. Then these are a little bit from top down. And also this one is kind of like a combination of others here. So you can kind of try to explore some of these shapes and kind of placements and angles of different objects if you just want to practice developing your style and maybe color language and line art. All right, here is another illustration which I created in autumn, and this one was another prompt from the bird list. So there were different birds, and this Eurasian sparrowhawk is very similar to kestrel or this other bird of prey, but this one is a little bit more bluish in tone. So that's why I thought that I can illustrate this one, because I really like the colors and the textures that you can add while drawing this bird. And also when you look at the other feathers, kind of from the bottom up, it has more orangey, almost golden feel of the feathers. So this one was very enjoyable research to look at different coloring of some of these birds of prey. I quite like how this one turned out, and I also have the illustration of the red kite, which I explored similar poses for this bird. All right, so let's look at more art. All right, here we go with a little bit different kind of look and feel compared to some of the autumn illustrations. So this one is one of the classes I made for autumn content in the art club, as many of you voted for this theme for the upcoming class. This class is all about how you can shade the face in this semi-realistic way, and I show you different steps and references, how you can go simply from here to here. So this might seem like a big jump or a big step when you just go from a sketch to this fully shaded kind of head or a face of a generic character. But during that class, I show you different ways how you can simplify this, and you can learn how to add light and shadow to the human head. Alright, so here is another illustration that I worked on during autumn and fall as one of the illustrations that I made as a client project for an exhibition about endangered animals. So one of the animals was Indian pangolin, and I looked at variety of references, and I kind of tried to imagine how I can make the animal look more colorful, and also how I can create the composition using more natural elements while adding some of the flowers. So I kind of ended up with this type of composition, and also these were prepared as prints. And I'm saying these because I created 3 animal illustrations for this project, and it was a very interesting project to work on because you can contribute to wildlife and nature projects around the world. So here is another illustration that I worked on for this project, and this one was Archie Frog. And let me show you another one. And here is the third illustration that I made for this exhibition, and this one is Philippine crocodile, which is also one of the endangered species. And this one was the most challenging one to illustrate because I was looking at different patterns and coloring while still trying to simplify some of these patterns and keep the illustration semi-realistic. But I like how it turned out, also in combination with some of these plants which I made in more painterly style, these edges and kind of these brush strokes on the plants. And if you're wondering, I used some of the painterly brushes. So for these brush strokes, I used a combination of different brushes, for example this one or brush number 8. and some of the brushes which had more kind of rough and jiggly edge. So this one kind of like rough edges, and then I worked on some of these smoother shapes and edges while using either where is it here, gouache set. So I used some of the like dry shader brush and also watercolor. So if I go to this brush set, I also use some of the more opaque watercolor brushes, and at the end I also added some textures with pastel brushes. So I played around with for example brush number 23, 20, and also like 27. So it's nice when you combine different textures. So this is what I played with in these illustrations. Alright, and here is an overall kind of page spread with a November mood, so kind of like an autumn mood. So here I combine different things. So for example, drinking tea with ginger, orange, cinnamon, chamomile, and echinacea. So some of these like cold month drinks. And one of my favorites are definitely ginger, and I also like to add echinacea during winter and this kind of like a cold season. And of course creamy soups, especially pumpkin or other kind of these hearty soups. So that's one of my favorites during the cold months. And this was kind of the mood that I wanted to explore, some of these like Scandinavian inspired sweaters, so maybe like Norwegian or Swedish sweaters with these patterns, and like leaves turning colors behind the window, and then maybe you can listen to and watch like fireplace, and maybe if you don't have a fireplace you can play the fireplace videos on YouTube and just have that in TV if you don't have a fireplace, obviously, and then picking up some nice book. So I thought this would be great mood for autumn. And then you can also listen to some cozy playlist, and instead of just illustrating one of our new devices like phone or whatever you are listening music on, I decided for this nice record player, which is quite cool. I like the design of this one specifically. And then you can also do some fall baking like cinnamon or cardamom, snails or buns, or these type of cupcakes or whatever you are into baking. I would love to know what you like to bake during the cold season. And for me specifically, the cardamom things are one of the most go-to or favorite. So cardamom or cinnamon, kind of inspired by some of the Swedish pastry. So I really like those. Alright, and here we have some also autumn looking foxes. I specifically like the colors on some of these animals and also different poses of the foxes. And this one was one of the also illustration for a tutorial in the art club. So one of them is simplifying the foxes into shapes. So you can learn how to build the basic shapes and silhouettes for the foxes while just using shapes like triangles, ovals, and circles, so it doesn't get too complicated. And then you can create more detailed sketches out of that. And the second tutorial or video that you can watch is how you can simply add colors to these foxes in quite quick and relaxing way, I think. So yeah, so this will be also linked in the description if you are interested in drawing foxes and learning how to simplify and stylize them into this semi-realistic way. And you can work on developing your own style while practicing this as well. And this one is one of the older illustrations that I made, but I still really like the coat on this character, and I think it really fits the season. So I really like these textures that you can kind of add on outfits. So maybe that's something you want to try when illustrating characters during the winter season. And I love these like oversized outfits, especially for the colder months. And here is another illustration that I made during autumn and fall. And this might feel a little bit more spring or summer-like because we can see the fruit, but I mean nowadays you can buy fruits and veggies all year round, which is great convenience. But this specific market photo was inspired by some of the markets in France or in London where you can buy fruits from different stalls. Of course, you can buy veggies and fruits in different parts of the world on different types of market. But basically, this class is all about how you can simplify very complex references and complex scenes while selecting your favorite objects and parts of the references and simplifying those and basically ignoring the rest in the references. So you can use this as a practice for urban sketching. So you can learn to draw from photo references first before you kind of jump into drawing directly in real life and sitting in a cafe or the side of the street or a square and try to capture moments in a kind of everyday life like you would do when doing urban sketching. But this one is kind of the practice, as I said, you can do before doing the urban sketching in a real life, or something that you can do during winter because it's quite cold to sit outside to do urban sketching, at least for me. So this is one of the projects in that class. And this one is the second project in that class where you can combine different references, like you can do also when drawing in real life, that you can look at different parts of the street and kind of combine everything into one illustration. So here we are talking about color balance, elements, how to draw characters in simple way, and how you can think about also perspective and proportion when looking at different references. So I quite like how this turned out, and it's still pretty loose and simple. So this is another way how you can also practice your style development by trying different ways how to draw things and illustrate things, and maybe part of that process it's kind of later part of your art style or your drawing process, right? So this is another illustration that you can get inspired by your everyday life or photo references or a bucket list that you want to, experience sometime in the future. And here is an older illustration, also inspired by autumn, but I thought that I can show this to you so you can get inspired and maybe draw a character using some of the kind of flow and movement of the leaves and air and wind during autumn and cold months. So you can kind of implement that into your illustration while kind of moving some of the objects or parts of your illustration, like hair. Scarves are perfect for this as well. And then you can also add some falling leaves. And this one is one of the older illustrations which I made for Halloween and autumn. And here I explored some of the shapes and line art for the elements while just using exact theme for kind of these darker elements. And this also became a pattern, and this is also one of the And I also turned this illustration into pattern, which is always so great to see on different products and when it's being licensed. So I really like some of these elements, like this cat I think turned out quite cool. I really like the expression on this cat, and I also like this bed, which is quite simplified. And Then also we have the owl and other elements as well. So this was more like Halloween and darker mood. And of course you can see the pumpkin, so you can imagine the fall, but you also have a broom and a crow, so, and some of the gemstones. So you can use these elements if you want to illustrate something more inspired by magic and these type of things. So you can balance some of the elements for autumn like that. And this one is one of the older illustrations, and I just wanted to show you this one because again we have these nice patterned sweaters which you can kind of illustrate in winter on your characters, and this one is part of also part of the character class, so you can explore drawing characters like these as well during the class. And I would like to kind of finish the collection or end this video with this illustration, which I still quite like. And here I explored combination of different colors while trying to keep the autumn mood and feel, but at the same time adding variety of colors. So you can see it's not only brown, yellow and orange, but here we have more colors in this illustration, which I think it turned quite well and I still quite like it. And also, as many of my other illustrations, this is part of one of the classes. So if you want to explore colors in more autumn botanical illustration, this might be the class for you. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this video and it brought you some new inspiration. So again, thanks so much, and I see you in the next video. Bye!